The morning the company fired Owen Mercer, he lost far more than a paycheck. He lost the future he had spent 12 years building, the routine that kept his little daughter smiling, and the confidence that had survived every hardship life had thrown at him. As he walked out carrying a small cardboard box with family photos, a worn coffee mug, and a notebook filled with unfinished ideas, the glass doors closed behind him as if they had erased his entire existence. Employees avoided looking into his eyes, security escorted him to the exit, and the woman who signed the termination papers never even glanced up from her tablet. She simply moved on to the next meeting, believing another ordinary employee had been replaced. Owen stood in the bright morning sunlight, took a slow breath, held back the tears threatening to fall, and promised himself that no matter how cruel the world became, he would never let his 8-year-old daughter, Hazel, see him give up. If you believe kindness always finds its way back, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Tales Story for more unforgettable stories about second chances, compassion, and the incredible power of ordinary people. For weeks, life became a quiet battle that no one noticed. Every sunrise found Owen searching job boards before Hazel woke up. He packed her lunch with whatever groceries he could afford, walked her to school with a smile that hid his worries, and spent the rest of the day attending interviews that always ended with polite rejection emails. Bills stacked higher on the kitchen counter while the refrigerator slowly emptied. Yet every afternoon, no matter how exhausted he felt, Owen crossed the narrow street to visit his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore. Most people barely noticed the old widow who lived alone in the small white house covered with climbing roses, but Owen remembered how she had brought homemade soup when Hazel caught pneumonia the previous winter. He believed kindness should never be measured by convenience. Every day became a familiar routine. Owen mowed Eleanor's lawn before the summer heat became unbearable. He repaired broken fence boards, replaced burned-out light bulbs, carried heavy grocery bags into her kitchen, cleaned leaves from the gutters, and patiently fixed anything around the house that had stopped working. Sometimes he simply sat on the porch drinking tea while Eleanor spoke about her late husband, old family traditions, and the neighborhood that had changed beyond recognition. Owen never accepted money. Eleanor often insisted, but he always smiled and reminded her that good neighbors looked after one another. Even when his own wallet contained only a few dollars, he refused every envelope she tried slipping into his pocket. Hazel loved those afternoons. She helped water Eleanor's colorful garden, laughed while chasing butterflies between the flowers, and listened to stories about growing up before smartphones and computers existed. Eleanor often told Hazel that the richest people were not those with the biggest bank accounts but those whose hearts stayed generous during difficult seasons. Hazel remembered every word because she watched her father live exactly that way. Unknown to Owen, someone else had quietly begun noticing these daily visits. Across the street, a black luxury sedan occasionally appeared for only a few minutes before leaving again. The tinted windows concealed the passenger inside, someone watching without ever stepping out. Owen never paid attention. His focus remained on helping Eleanor and finding enough work to keep the lights on. One warm Saturday afternoon, Eleanor asked Owen to organize several dusty boxes stored in her attic. The old wooden stairs creaked beneath his feet as sunlight streamed through tiny windows, revealing decades of forgotten memories. Inside the boxes were faded photographs, military medals, handwritten letters, children's drawings, and newspaper clippings documenting remarkable achievements. Owen carefully cleaned each item while Eleanor explained the stories behind them. Among the papers lay photographs of Eleanor standing beside successful business leaders, charity events, and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Owen assumed they were simply distant relatives or old friends from another chapter of her life. Weeks turned into months, and the financial pressure became unbearable. Owen sold his watch, postponed car repairs, and quietly skipped meals so Hazel would never notice how little food remained. Still, every afternoon he found time for Eleanor because helping someone else somehow reminded him that he still had value. His kindness was never a performance. No cameras recorded it. No social media posts celebrated it. It happened simply because he believed people deserved compassion whether anyone noticed or not. One bright morning, Eleanor failed to answer her front door. Concerned, Owen used the spare key she had trusted him with months earlier. He found her sitting weakly in the kitchen after becoming dizzy while making breakfast. Without hesitation, he drove her to the hospital, stayed through every examination, contacted her relatives using the emergency numbers she had written down, and remained beside her until doctors confirmed she would recover. Eleanor squeezed his hand with grateful tears filling her eyes. She whispered that very few people would have interrupted their own difficult lives to help someone else's. 3 days later, Eleanor returned home. She insisted she felt much stronger, but Owen continued checking on her daily. One afternoon she handed him a handwritten note thanking him for restoring her faith in humanity. Owen folded it carefully into his wallet, unaware it would soon become one of his most treasured possessions. Meanwhile, Hazel noticed her father's growing sadness despite his cheerful smile. One evening she quietly placed her small piggy bank on the kitchen table and told him she wanted to help pay the bills. Owen hugged her tightly, fighting back tears as he realized his daughter had inherited the same generous heart he tried so hard to protect. Instead of opening the piggy bank, he promised her that brighter days would come because hope was something no hardship could ever steal. Then came the day everything changed. Eleanor called Owen early in the morning asking if he could help receive a special visitor because climbing the porch steps had become difficult. Owen arrived carrying fresh bread from the neighborhood bakery, expecting perhaps a nurse or distant relative. He straightened Eleanor's living room, placed flowers in a vase, and opened the front door when the doorbell finally rang. The moment the door swung open, time seemed to freeze. Standing on the porch was Vivian Cross, the powerful chief executive officer who had fired Owen months earlier without looking into his eyes. She wore an elegant business suit and carried an expensive leather folder, but the confidence that once surrounded her had been replaced by visible surprise. Her expression changed the instant she recognized the man standing before her. Owen felt his heartbeat race as memories of that painful morning flooded back. Neither expected this impossible meeting. Vivian slowly looked past Owen toward Eleanor sitting inside the house. Only then did Owen realize something extraordinary. Eleanor smiled warmly and introduced Vivian as her granddaughter. Silence filled the room. Vivian stepped inside looking completely different from the distant executive Owen remembered. She listened quietly as Eleanor spent nearly an hour describing everything Owen had done over the previous months. She spoke about the repaired fence, the hospital visit, the groceries, the garden, the conversations that chased loneliness away, and the countless acts of kindness that had never asked for recognition. Every sentence seemed to remove another layer of the assumptions Vivian had made about people. She admitted she had believed success came only from efficiency, numbers, and difficult decisions. Hearing about Owen forced her to confront how easily she had overlooked genuine character. Eleanor then opened a small wooden chest containing every thank you note Owen had refused to keep, photographs Hazel had drawn for her, and a notebook where she had written down each act of kindness he had shown. Vivian turned the pages slowly. There were no grand gestures, only hundreds of small moments proving that compassion was part of Owen's everyday life. For the first time in many years, Vivian apologized without making excuses. She admitted that during the company's restructuring, she had approved hundreds of layoffs based entirely on spreadsheets and recommendations from executives who never truly knew their employees. Owen's name had become nothing more than a number. She confessed that opening her grandmother's front door expecting another caregiver and instead finding the man she had dismissed had shaken her more deeply than any business failure ever could. Owen accepted the apology with quiet dignity. He explained that losing his job had hurt, but allowing bitterness to replace kindness would have hurt even more. Helping Eleanor had never been about impressing anyone. It simply felt like the right thing to do. Vivian asked permission to visit again the following weekend. She returned with Hazel's favorite books, gardening supplies for Eleanor, and hours of genuine conversation. Over several visits she learned about Owen's dedication as both a father and employee. She discovered former co-workers had respected his honesty, creativity, and willingness to mentor new staff. Those qualities had never appeared on the reports she signed. Within a month, Vivian announced a major change inside her company. Performance reviews would no longer rely only on numbers. Leadership training would include empathy, community involvement, and employee well-being. She personally invited Owen back, not to his old position, but to lead a new department focused on workplace culture, mentorship, and community partnerships. The salary was higher than before, the schedule allowed more time with Hazel, and the role reflected the values Owen had quietly demonstrated long before anyone important noticed. The news spread through the company. Employees who had once watched Owen leave carrying a cardboard box now welcomed him back with heartfelt respect. Many admitted they had been inspired by the story they heard from Eleanor and Vivian. Owen never celebrated with pride or revenge. He simply returned to work with the same humility that had guided him through his hardest days. Eleanor often smiled from her porch as she watched Owen and Hazel leave for work and school each morning. The little White House no longer seemed lonely because laughter visited it almost every afternoon. Vivian became a regular guest as well, discovering that success meant far more than quarterly profits. She invested in neighborhood volunteer programs, employee assistance funds, and community projects that reflected the lesson her grandmother had spent a lifetime teaching. Before this story ends, we have one heartfelt request. Please comment with the words, "Kindness always comes back." Your message may encourage someone who is struggling today to keep believing that compassion still matters. Years later, people often asked Owen what changed his life. They expected him to mention the promotion, the salary, or meeting the CEO again. Instead, he always remembered the quiet afternoon spent helping an elderly neighbor without expecting anything in return. Those ordinary moments had built a bridge between broken dreams and unexpected hope. They reminded everyone who heard his story that the greatest opportunities sometimes arrive disguised as simple acts of kindness. A door that once represented rejection eventually opened to redemption, forgiveness, and a future brighter than Owen had ever imagined. Sometimes the world notices goodness much later than we hope, but genuine kindness never disappears. It waits patiently, grows quietly, and returns when we least expect it, changing not only one life but every heart it touches. And on that beautiful sunny day, as Owen walked home beside Hazel while Eleanor waved from her blooming garden and Vivian smiled from the porch, it became clear that kindness had accomplished what power and wealth never could. It had brought strangers together, healed old wounds, restored hope, and proved that the strongest legacy any person can leave behind is simply choosing to care for someone else when no one is watching. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with your family and friends, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Kindness Tales Story so together we can continue spreading hope, compassion, and inspiring stories that remind the world kindness is never wasted.